This video is part of the October 23rd remote class. These videos have been an exploration of the many tools that allow us to analyze and modify and create new and overlap and repair and summarize different geographies. In the last video, we introduced one of my all-time favorite tools called Spatial Join. And we used it for its simplest purpose, right? At its simplest purpose, a spatial join takes two things and joins their data based on a shared geography, right? So last video, we looked at places I want to live and joined to each place I want to live all the information we could find about the farmer's market that was closest. But what I ended last video with a proposition was, what if we didn't think about the join as one-to-one, but a one-to-many, as more of a summary? That we didn't join a single crime point here, but rather for each individual neighborhood, we summarized all of the crimes. For each individual neighborhood, we summarized all of the population blocks that are within them. That is what we're going to focus on in this video. Now, the tool I'm going to show you is Spatial Join. It can be emulated to a degree with this one called Summarize Within. I think it does it a little less powerfully. You know, the Summarize or Spatial Join has sort of more options, but as such, it takes sort of more control and mastery over it. So I'm going to teach you Spatial Join, and then maybe we can see sort of the comparison. So again, Spatial Join is one of the top ones that they keep right here. You know, if you want to be memorizing the toolkit, you can find it under Analysis, Overlay, Spatial Join. All right, same thing, right? The target features is what I want to come back. Well, I want the neighborhoods to come back. I want to know some information about crimes, right? The joining crimes. Now, let's say maybe the neighborhoods contain the crimes, right? Neighborhoods contain the crimes. Here's the difference. Find your way down to the first thing that you get with crime. Now, remember, there are thousands or hundreds or dozens of crimes in each neighborhood. So how do you think this tool would work? If we proved last video that what this tool does is join one record to the table, how would it choose which crime to append in this neighborhood? Well, it does it right here. If I navigate down to the field map, to the first field that is in the crimes, DC District, notice what it says is first. I'm taking the first value I can find. Well, that's fascinating. What other options are you? The last, the count, the minimum. And suddenly this becomes a vastly more powerful tool. Let's go to sector and delete everything. Slowly, just keep DC dist. Try to delete everything else. If you delete DC dist, don't worry about it, just keep one other field. Now let's take DC dist and say merge rule. Instead of bringing the first value you find, whatever the first DC district is for the many crimes that are in your geography, you know, screw names or categories at all, just count. Count up for me how many records you find. And I could even change the name is what's really cool here, right? I can come here and I can right-click DC Disk and I can rename it. Sometimes you got to do it twice. And I could say total crime. Hidden right there. Something that makes Spatial Join incredibly powerful. Stop joining and perform a statistic. So let's run it. Boobity 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 boop. It's going to do its thing. Again, this is a perfect example of professor laziness, right? It's going to take its sweet time. Again, there's a lot of sort of values I probably should have selected. But, put on some light, easy listening. All right. The geography is the same as it should be, right? We put in neighborhood features. We want to get that back. But the difference is if I now open the attribute table and I scroll all the way to the end, total crime, right? Now, it turned it into a text because DC dist was a text field, right? So I'd have to convert that back. But I mostly wanted to do that as an example to show you that it'll also do the same thing here under join count. Join count is automatically appended, and it counts the number of things. So I now know there are 239 crimes in Bridesburg, right? There were 252 in Chestnut Hill. I am now able to take two different things that have no relationship to one another and summarize them based on their overlap. Well, let's do that with something even more logical. Let's do it with the census blocks. Now, this would be a fascinating thing because the census blocks actually have values in their table that I can summarize. I could summarize the total population, the white population, the black population, the indigenous population, right? Asian, Pacific Hawaiian Islander, the number who own their home, the number who rent. All of those are open to me to summarize. Now, I might want to do a little modeling first, right? Because when you start to run this tool and you use things like intersect and within, you have to start to answer questions about like what happens in those very rare instances where something like kind of touches one neighborhood and kind of touches the other. Like, I don't know, it's so imperceptible, but maybe this neighborhood sort of intersects both, and I don't really want the values of this to be in both neighborhoods. And this is a good way to use that trick we learned in the other video. I don't really need to know the borders of the census blocks. I just need a point, right? I just need a central point representing their middle. So I can come to that tool we learned a couple videos ago, toolbox, data management, features, feature to point, and I'll say, hey, I just want the, well, let me make sure nothing's selected. Going to go to map. Good, nothing selected. Input features will be the census blocks, and, I'll want an inside, and I'll go to where I'm saving stuff, and I'll say block center, and I'll run it. And again, the point of this is I just want to obviate those random instances where there may be sort of blocks that overlap multiple neighborhoods or sort of don't line up perfectly, and I don't want them giving their population value to two different neighborhoods, right? Because if you intersect two different things, that's what will happen. But now I've created a situation where that's not going to happen, right? I have their central point, and now I can sort of see and summarize only those instances where the central point is going to be within, right, the geometry. And now it is much sort of clearer what I would be summarizing. So now let's take each neighborhood. We'll reopen spatial join. Analysis, again, it's right down here, or you could go through the toolbar. Neighborhoods is still what I'm doing my summary, right? I want the neighborhoods. I want them to tell me about the block center. And I could say something that says, nay with pop. And again, let's come down and do the trick, right? Come on down and find, the fields that you need. Well, I don't really need all this other extemporaneous shit that would come over from the block center, right? I can see that shape area is the last thing in neighborhoods, and I want to keep that. But I don't need to know, like, that's just the state's name. That tells me nothing. Nothing, 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 boom. Suddenly you're at population. And I don't want you to tell me the population from the first point you came across, however the hell you process. I want you to take all the points and summarize them. Right? Take all the white population and summarize. Take all the values from the black population and summarize. And so on and so forth for each of the indicators. And again, if you had things like home value, and maybe that's what you wanted to know, you could do the average, right? Or you could do the median, or you could do the mode, right? There's all kinds of things you can do here that are different statistical operations. Again, I'm just doing sort of the sum because I wanted to summarize all the values. Right here, I am showing you how you actually take a non-administrative boundary, right? Something that's not a census tract or a city or whatever, maybe a shape you've drawn or a neighborhood or something informal, and use it to summarize population. That is what we are doing right here. Anytime anyone tells you the number of people that are in a neighborhood or that are in their study area, this is how they are doing it. They are doing it by running some kind of spatial join that summarizes all the things that are within their geography, right? Neighborhood with pop, I've hit sum, and I can say, let's say the neighborhoods that contain, right, the block center point. Now run it. Bleebity, bleebity, blobbity, bloop, right? It's going to do its thing. I've got neighborhoods with pop. And now something super useful, visual and analytical. I can now, for each neighborhood, see its population, right? See the number of white residents, black residents, Native American residents, Asian residents, Hawaiian Pacific Islander, other race, 2 or more races, the total housing units, the owner-occupied, the vacant, the rental-occupied. I now know, for these non-administrative boundaries, something demographic. And extrapolate this anywhere. Number of bike crashes, right? Average hours a bar is open, right? Number of bicycle shops, right? Average elevation. Anything that can be summarized as long as it overlaps or is contained by or is within can be handled by spatial join when you treat it like a summary. Again, you can do the same thing here with summarize within, right? It's a little different, but I would take the polygon, like neighborhoods. I want to summarize the block center points, right? And you just sort of add what you want to summarize, right? Population, that should be a summary, or it's just a simpler way of sort of doing it, but it's good that you learn sort of the other one. Population, just do, pop white and black. So you got sort of a quick cross section. You can run it. It'll do its thing. Bloop, 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 bloop. Again, it's going to take its time, bleepity blabbity bloopity bloop, and eventually you'll get yourself a feature class that looks, somewhat similar to what we had right here, but that's just sort of summarizing these 3. Again, I don't know why it's taking longer in the spatial join, but there's another reason to use spatial join. Doesn't take sort of nearly as long to kind of run it. Textbook ArcGIS sort of stealing my thunder right here. Maybe I'll give it, I don't know, 20 more seconds to hold you on here to see if the answer comes back to us before I sort of just hit stop, and if you ran this yourself, you'll see what the answer is. But that's spatial join, right? Spatial join, incredibly powerful tool that I hope you're just wrapping your heads around. This is how you take a geography, a border, a point, a something, and summarize everything that's within a certain distance of it. Summarize everything that contains it. Summarize everything that overlaps it and intersects it. It's really what allows you to start combining multiple files, not just in a geometric fashion, but in a way that uses the information to analyze and summarize something that you know is there, but that you can't quite quantify yet. And yes, my patience is done, so I am going to hit stop on this thing. But if you have patience and want to keep it running, you'll see sort of the same result shows up in the end.